So MDL book tasting 2020-2021 version. So as I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the books that came out during this weird year for publishing. The first 3 months were pretty normal, and then once the pandemic hit, the publishing industry kind of came to a halt like so many other industries, and so there were a lot of books that were maybe supposed to come out this year that got pushed back. The ones that are getting published for 2021, it's a little bit more sparse than it has been in past years, I've noticed with ordering. But I'll talk a little bit about the ones that we do know that are coming out, and some of them we actually have dates for, which is great. And some of them were pushed back from 2020. So one of the big ones from this year was The Vanishing Half. This one got a lot of press. HBO has already purchased the rights for it, so it's something we'll probably see coming to the small screen in the coming years. It's about two twin sisters whose lives diverge in drastic ways. They both leave their childhood town, and one of them begins passing as white. And so it kind of follows like the racial politics of that situation and the family dynamics. It was on many best of lists for this year, and it was a New York Times one of the 10 best books of 2020. So that would be a good one to check out. Another big one that came out is The Glass Hotel. The author, Emily St. John Mandel, is the author of Station 11, which was a really popular book a few years back, I think 2016. This one takes place, kind of jumps all over the place, but it starts off around a mysterious graffiti incident that happens on a Vancouver island. And then it also involves this giant Ponzi scheme situation and kind of the fallout for the family and for the other people involved. And this was another one that was on multiple Best Book of the Year lists. All right. Another big one that came out this year, Alice Hoffman, who wrote Practical Magic, which was also a very popular movie. I remember in I think the late 90s with Sandra Bullock. That one, hello Kim. That one, she ended up publishing a prequel to Practical Magic this year called Magic Lessons. I believe this one came out in April or May, and so it kind of came out as the pandemic was really ramping up, and so it might have gotten missed on some to-read lists. And this one follows the story of Maria Owens and kind of talks about how her family becomes cursed. The Guest List is another book that was on a lot of best of lists this year. It's described as being part Agatha Christie, part Big Little Lies. So it sounds like it's a good entertaining read. It was also chosen for Reese Witherspoon's book club this year, and it was selected as the 2020 mystery and thriller book by Goodreads, which is a community reading site. And so that was chosen by readers as the top mystery thriller for 2020. One that I would personally recommend is The Thursday Murder Club. It's one that came out this year. It's a debut novel by Richard Osman, who is a British comedian game show guy, quiz show person. So if you've ever watched QI or Taskmaster, he features on those. Anyway, so it's a British, it's called a cozy crime caper, so kind of like your cozy mysteries, but it follows a group of individuals who are living in a assisted living, retirement living community, but who are very clearly, one of them was involved in like M15 or something at one point, and so they decide that they aren't quite ready to be retired and they would like to solve murders, and they have a few to solve in this book. So that's one that I would recommend, is just having a lot of heart and being very, very clever and funny, laugh out loud funny. Another big sequel this year, part of a series, was The Mirror and the Light. So this is the third part for the trilogy written by Hilary Mantel, started with Wolf Hall. And so this is the final part of the saga of Thomas Cromwell. And it begins, I believe, after the beheading of Anne Boleyn, I believe. after the killing of one of Henry VIII's wives. I can't remember which one it starts with.
I think it was Anne Boleyn.
Anne Boleyn, okay, yeah. So it's been shortlisted. It was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2020, and it was longlisted for the Booker Prize, and it was named a best book by a lot of different big names this year. So that's a good one to check out. Again, another sequel. It was a big year for sequels this year. Ernest Cline wrote Ready Player One, which was a very popular kind of pop culture book a few years ago and became a movie that came out last year or the year before. This one is already being developed into a film, and Steven Spielberg apparently helped with the writing of the follow-up book. A big crossover book, Christopher Kelly, you might have to help me with the pronunciation of that last name, because
Paolini.
Paolini. Yes. So he wrote Aragon and the Inheritance Cycle, which is a young adult series, very popular young adult series, and this was his first book intended for adult readers. It's a science fiction fantasy story, and this one is also being made into a movie. So if you like to get it in before you see the movie, this would be fun to check out. In the world of horror books, Stephen King came out with a short story collection this year. Another one that came out kind of in the midst of the pandemic, May or June, when it was really going, and it was kind of hard to get these books for the library, much less for people to necessarily know that they were coming out. All of the stories in this have already been selected by various different entertainment sources. One has been bought by Netflix. One Ben Stiller has bought the rights to and plans on starring in. One has been optioned by Darren Aronofsky, who did Requiem for a Dream and Pi and The Fountain. And then HBO has acquired the rights for If It Bleeds, the title story. Because they haven't acquired it yet, but one of the characters from that title story is in the Outsider series that they did, so it's suggested that they might end up getting this one as well. In the science fiction vein, the science fiction horror vein, World War Z came out probably pretty close to a decade ago now. That was a very popular title that was kind of like a faux documentary talking about the zombie takeover. And this one, very much in that vein, is the author's second book, which is, or not second book, but similar one to that, called De-Evolution. And this one, instead of tackling zombies, he's tackling Sasquatch and what happens when Sasquatch starts coming out in the wake of an eruption of Mount Rainier. So expect a lot of chaos, and I've heard it's a little gory, so be aware of that. Moving into nonfiction that came out this year, there were some poetry collections that came out by some big name fiction authors, including Margaret Atwood's Dearly and How to Fly by Barbara Kingsolver. The two that might have flown under the radar, sometimes the poem collections and nonfiction collections by fiction authors don't get a lot of press anyway, but these were two that came out in 2020. In history, John Meacham, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner, released a new book, The Soul of America, and the description of that was looking at understanding the present moment in American politics by looking back at other times and looking at when hope overcame division and fear. So very timely for 2020 by a big recognized author. Another Pulitzer Prize winning author who published a book this year is Isabel Wilkerson. And that book is Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, that talks about the racial caste system in the US. And the book previously published was The Warmth of Other Suns, that talked about the migration from the South to the North following the Civil War. Also in history, we have The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson, who is the author of Devil in the White City, which was on a lot of big lists when that came out. A good blend of, he usually does a blend of true crime and history. So you'll get the history chapters that are very entertaining, and then you'll get the true crime chapters, which are horrifying, and he kind of like mixes those two up. This one deals with World War II, and it was on several best of lists. Also, I'll move my little thing so I can see what I wrote. We have Hidden Valley Road. This one, it was chosen as Oprah's book club pick, and it follows the story of a mid-century American family where 6 of their 12 children were diagnosed with schizophrenia. And it talks about science's attempts with this family and like how it interacts with that family to try to understand how schizophrenia presents and how that works. So as I said, this one was an Oprah's book club pick, and it was also on several top 10 books of the year lists. And all of the books that I talk about today, we have at the library, or we are going to be getting for the 2021 books. Several of them are also available on Libby or on Hoopla. So, and we can always get them for you. If we don't have them in audio or large print, we can always get them through mail as well. So this is a big year for biographies and memoirs also. We have Michael J. Fox, who came out with a memoir this year, which I just love that title, No Time Like the Future. Also out from the Brat Pack, we've got Demi Moore came out with a memoir this year, and Jerry Seinfeld came out with a memoir, Is This Anything? Also in biographies and memoirs, Alex Trebek. He had started writing this book from what I read during the pandemic, and talked about his how happy he was to be able to spend that time with his family in the end of his battle with, I believe, pancreatic cancer. So I've heard really good things about that book, but that just came out last month, I believe. The Pioneer Woman from Food Network came out with another book this year with a memoir. Her books tend to be quite popular, and this one, again, 2020 just kind of flew under the radar here. And of course, Barack Obama came out with A Promised Land, the first in a, I believe, 3 or 4 part series, and it's a pretty thick book too. So he's got a lot of writing ahead of him for this, but and we do have copies of that at the library. In audio, something that came out this year, audio was one of those ones that also got disrupted quite a bit along with the rest of the publishing industry. But a lot of books that would normally have come out on audio as well as print actually didn't come out on audio this year. But one that we do have is David Sedaris's new collection of essays called The Best of Me. And if you've never listened to an audiobook read by David Sedaris of his own essays, I would highly recommend it. He is just a hilarious man. So, so that was a good one that came out this year. Another thing that I want to talk about, and these are going to be other books from 2020, the Library of Michigan has released their Michigan Notable Books. Technically, it's Michigan Notable Books 2021, but it's for books that were published last year. So a couple of them that are in the adult collection that we have or are going to be getting are The King of Confidence, A Tale of Utopian Dreamers, Frontier Schemers, True Believers, False Prophets, and the Murder of an American Monarch, which got on a lot of lists and just looks very fascinating. And then we have Alice Randall released Black Bottom Saints, a novel about Detroit that is takes place during the jazz era. All right, so now we're leaving 2020 behind. Well, until Kelly talks about the young adult books, but for right now, we're leaving 2020 behind, and we'll look a little bit at the 2021 books that are coming up. And also, this is when I discovered that I could use different designs in PowerPoint, so these ones will look a little different. All right, so one that's coming out this year, one of the big celebrations at the beginning of each year is Public Domain Day, where classic works are released from copyright into the public domain. And this year, one of the big works, along with Miss Dalloway, is The Great Gatsby. so that is officially in the public domain now. And to mark that, we have Michael Farris Smith, a well-known fiction literary author, who is right here with a prequel to The Great Gatsby called Nick, that follows Nick's story through the war. So that came out on January 6th, and I've ordered a copy. I don't know if it's in yet, but we will have that at the library. Also, I'm gonna move my stuff around so I can see what's on here. If you're familiar with the Hogarth Shakespeare series, they have been releasing each year, they've been enlisting different popular authors to do retellings of classic Shakespeare stories. So Joe Nesbo had one a couple years ago about Macbeth. There was a Margaret Atwood one, and the one coming up in 2021 is Gillian Flynn from Gone Girl is writing a retelling of Hamlet, which I don't believe they have the actual title for yet, and it was supposed to originally come out in January, and now I think they're talking about April, but so that is going to be coming out sometime in 2021. Other big ones, Kazuo Ishiguro has a new book coming out. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature, I believe it was last year. It may have been 2019. 2020 is kind of a blur. The author of The Remains of the Day and Never Let Me Go. This one follows an artificial intelligence who is like living in a shop front and just observing the people going by and waiting for someone to purchase her, I guess. So it sounds like an interesting meditation on human behavior and on what it means to be human. And that's coming out March 2nd. Also, Junpo Lahiri has a new book coming out, also a winner of a Pulitzer Prize. So lots of Pulitzer Prize winners coming out with titles last year and this year. So this one comes out in April. She was the author of Interpreter of Maladies. And this one follows a year in the life of a woman in the wake of her father's death. And it sounds like it's kind of a meditation on life and follows her experiences through that year. Book club favorite Kristen Hannah is also coming out with a new book this year called The Four Winds that takes place during the Great Depression. She wrote The Great Alone, which takes place in Alaska, and The Nightingale, which took place during World War II. She's very good at writing these books that really encapsulate a time and a place. So I'm interested to see what she ends up doing with the Great Depression. And that comes out at the beginning of February. If you enjoy science fiction or science-based fiction, Andy Weir has a new book coming out after his smash hit, The Martian, which was actually, I believe, self-published, and then it ended up getting picked up. So this one's called Project Hail Mary, and the blurb for it is a lone astronaut must save Earth from disaster. So sounds like it's going to be an adventure story. And that is going to also be coming to the big screen in the coming year or two, and it's going to be starring Ryan Gosling. So that's going to probably be another big name movie for him. Some mysteries and thrillers that came out from some of our perennial favorites who have their big series. J.D. Robb is coming out with one in February, and then another one is coming out in September. James Patterson always has books coming out, but he has one coming up in January specifically that's part of his big series. And then J.A. Jantz has a new Brady novel coming out in February. Also, Janet Ivanovich, she's got one coming out in March, and then another book in a new series coming out towards the end of the year. Anne Perry has one in April, one of her Daniel Pitt novels, and then Clive Cussler also has a new book coming out. So these authors, they usually have at least 1 or 2 or 5 coming out every year, but those are the new ones at the beginning of 2021. And of course, Nora Roberts has a new one coming out too, out May 22nd. Romance, ambition, traumatic past, you know, what you expect from Nora Roberts. And then Danielle Steele has 5 books coming out in 2021. So far, this only takes us up through August. Neighbors is coming out in January. The Affair is coming out in March. Finding Ashley is coming out in April. Danielle Steele's 9 Lives is coming out in July, and then Complications is coming out in August. So if you like Danielle Steele, you are going to have a lot of reading ahead of you in 2021. In nonfiction, there are also, I believe, just one big name one that has been announced so far, and that is Bill Gates is coming out with How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. So some scientific, technological looks at climate for 2021. That's due to come out in February. All right, so that is my whirlwind look at what was in 2020, what is going to be coming out in 2021. So those are the adult titles that we know of so far. I'm sure there will be more added, but given the kind of uncertainty in the publishing industry at the moment as things kind of get back rolling, that's what we know so far. So I'm going to have Kelly tell us a little bit about what's coming up and what was in 2020 for the young adult and juvenile books. And then we'll have a chance to talk about what you read in 2020, what you're looking forward to in 2021. But Kelly, take it away.
Thank you, Chelsea. For those of you who don't know who I am the youth programming librarian at the Marshall District Library, and it's my job to do all the things with the kids' books and the teen books, which are some of my favorite things to read. So I'm excited to show you some of the highlights of 2020 and some things to look forward to in 2021. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get my PowerPoint ready. Okay. Come on. There we go. Okay, now I need to move people's faces so I can see everything. Okay. One of the highlights I wanted to bring up first from 2020 is Jason Reynolds' Stamped. This is a nonfiction teen adaptation of the Ibram X. Kendi book, Stamped from the Beginning. The two of them paired up to bring the book more to the YA audience since it was important stuff to read and learn. And so this one's just similar information written more for the teen audience. I personally listened to the audiobook for this one, and Jason Reynolds reads it himself. Totally recommend it. He's awesome. But this one was also the Goodreads Choice Award for Nonfiction for 2020, and also the Nerdy Book Club Award for Nonfiction in 2020. A lot of these teen books are featured on the Goodreads Choice Awards. If I know Chelsea mentions Goodreads a couple times for her adult fiction. With the awards being a little more limited for the kids section, you will often find them on Goodreads instead. Another big one for 2020 was the sequel by Karen McManus called One of Us Is Next. The first one, One of Us Is Lying, was one of the biggest hits for the teen literature in 2019. This one was the nominee for Young Adult Fiction Best Choice. It did not win, but it was in the top 3. And this is kind of like a Agatha Christie breakfast club kind of thing, where like a group of friends and there was a murder and they had to figure out who was it or what it didn't do it. It was really big with the teens and a lot with the adults. By the way, like I'm doing the J and teen, but anybody can read these. But the first book in the series, The One of Us Is Lying, is already being adapted into an episodic TV show, and which will be available on NPC's Peacock streaming network. That'll be coming out next year. Another big finale in the teen/Js for 2020 was the 5th and final book for The Trials of Apollo, The Tower of Nero by Rick Riordan. Everyone's probably heard Rick Riordan's name so far, but this was his last book in the Gods of Olympus type world building that he has done over 3 separate series. This is the conclusion, where Lester's teaming up with his demigod master Meg to follow the prophecy that leads to the ultimate confrontation with Python at the Tower of Nero. If you like mythology, if you like adventure, if you like a good touch of comedy, Rick Riordan is definitely for you. I just finished reading this after Christmas and I highly recommend it. Stephanie Meyer came back this year. If you're familiar with the Twilight series, this is a prequel / companion novel for the original 4 books that came out in the early 2000s. This was the Goodreads Choice nominee for Young Adult Fantasy and Science Fiction for 2020. This is technically a retelling of the first Twilight book with some information tacked on at the beginning from Edward's point of view. So the first book, or the main series, does follow Bella. This one gives you a chance to see what's going on in Edward's head, who is the main vampire in the series. We have the book at the library, of course, along with the audio if you are a fan of audiobooks. Another big name, again, that came out with a prequel is Suzanne Collins, the writer of the Hunger Games trilogy. The sequel came out back in May. Again, it was one of those books that kind of was during all the reopening processes, so it was easy to get mixed. This is the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It was another nominee for the Best Young Adult Fantasy and Science Fiction for 2020. And this one actually takes place 64 years before the events of the Hunger Games. The main character is Coriolanus Snow, which you know him as President Snow if you've read the original trilogy. And he's kind of the main villain architect of all of the nastiness that goes down there. But this is kind of showing how he got into the system, how he became the big name he was. And it is also being made into a movie. There is information that, you know, people are working on it. There is no release date yet. There are no names for actors attached. So we won't probably see it until late 2022 or early 2023. Now moving on in the 2020s for the juvenile fiction. This was a big one for a lot of different reasons. This is just called When You Trap a Tiger. One of the greatest things that I saw happening in 2020 is just a really big increase in the diversity in juvenile fiction. And this has a lot of culture in with it about, oh shoot, I should have written it down. I believe it's with Thailand, but just like with the mythology that, you know, tigers have this great magical power and you can actually kind of make deals with them, kind of like, almost like a genie. And in this book, our main character Lily finds out that her grandmother Helmoni had made a deal with a tiger and she's now sick, and so Lily has to go find that tiger or find another tiger to help her in order to save her grandmother. A big graphic novel that came out in 2020 is When the Stars Are Scattered, by Victoria Jameson and Omar Mohammed. Victoria Jameson is a bigger name in the juvenile graphic novels. She was really big for Roller Girl, and also All's Fair and Love and War. Fair spelled with an E because it has to deal with the Renaissance fairs. She's a fun person. This was the National Book Award finalist for Young People's Literature in 2020, and is also a Goodreads Choice nominee for graphic novels and comics in 2020. And it was highlighted for its wonderful representation of life for younger kids in refugee camps, so that it can bring that story on to young readers, of course, as well as adults. Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mbala. These ones, if you're not familiar, Rick Riordan Presents is not technically Rick Riordan. Well, he has his hands in it, but he is not the writer. He teamed up with his publisher, which is Hyperion with Disney Press, to bring a whole bunch of various mythologies from all over the world into juvenile and teen fiction. So he just wants to press all the wonderful different things that you can find around the world, not just Greek, even though it's really popular. And this one deals with West African and American Southern legends and mythology. This one got the Coretta Scott King Book Award nominee for the author. It was a nominee for middle grade and children's in 2019, and it was the Ignite Award for Best in Middle Grade for 2020. The second book in this series comes out soon. I want to say next month. Another one highlighted for its diversity and wonderful culture references was Ghost Squad by Claribel Ortega. This was a nominee for middle grade and children's choice for 2020. And this just follows Lucila and she likes to work with ghosts. It's kind of the family business. So that is kind of a popular theme in juvenile fiction. I think it's fun too. So if you like ghost hunting, definitely pick up this one. This is The King and the Fireflies. Case and Calendar has been a little busy lately. Their initial book called The Hurricane Season was a really big award winner as well when it came back out in 2017, 2018 for the juvenile fiction. This was their follow-up novel, which follows, you know, a small turbulent Louisiana town and one boy's grief as he deals with things with his brother, things with himself, and just kind of finding his own skin. And Kaysen also has put out a teen book last year, which I'm really excited to read, called Felix Ever After. I don't have that on the slideshow, but I wanted to point that one out. Next. Okay, on to 2021. 2020 is officially behind us in both slideshows. Okay. Of course, a big name in teen literature, even if you don't read teens, is Angie Thomas. Her big hit was The Hate You Give, which was also turned into a movie. And then she followed up with On the Come Up, which is also in the works of being a movie. And Concrete Rose is actually a prequel to The Hate You Give. This follows a gang leader's son and his efforts to go straight for the sake of his child, challenged by a loved one's brutal murder in a poignant exploration of Black coming of age. This is a character who's related to the characters in The Hate You Give. Plus it has a pretty cover. Okay. A series finale is coming up soon. If you are unfamiliar with Ransom Riggs, he wrote the Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Children series. It first started off as just a trilogy, but then I guess he had too many ideas swimming around in his head and he decided to continue it. So this is technically book 6 now. And it is kind of a science fiction horror amalgamation. I'm never quite sure where to put it. But it's really fun. He started off writing the series because he was collecting old photos in flea markets and secondhand stores where he would just buy a box of random photos, and a lot of them ended up being really weird. And he's like, there's a story behind this, and he just crafted a story with all these different photos, and he includes the photos in the story. So if you like your things a little bit strange, and if you like a little bit of history in there, because they tend to go back to the time of World War II, definitely pick up Ransom Riggs, and then The Desolation of Devil's Acre will be the finale. Along with a strange line there, David Arnold, he's one of those YA authors that gets a lot of credit, though I find adult readers tend to pick him up more than teen readers. I'm not sure why, but The Electric Kingdom is coming out soon, and it kind of has a 2020 vibe just because there is a really weird fly flu that is sweeping the globe and how it's affecting people. And except this now has a kind of supernatural element with the deliverer who is, you know, reliving everything, and they're just trying to kind of end the cycle for themselves, so the people who are living through this, and then so the deliverer can move on as well. And also, again, pretty cover. Okay, Julie Murphy, she's fun too. Pumpkin is coming out this spring. Julie Murphy was first known for Dumplin', which was the first book in this kind of related series. They're not totally connected, but they're kind of in the same universe and in the same theme. Dumplin' was also made into a Netflix film. Yeah, I believe it's still on there. This one is about Waylon, and he gets dumped. And his sister and he had made a plan about going to a specific college together, but then his sister drops out, and then a whole bunch of things happens with an audition tape for a TV show, and he's hitting some very big high school drama things. So it all accumulates into him being nominated for prom queen. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to go with it because I'm going to live my best life and be fabulous with it. And along with it, his sister's girlfriend is nominated for prom king, and they're just like, we're going to nail this. It's going to be an awesome senior year, and we're going to go out with a very glittery bang. On to Juvenile Fiction 2021. This is a follow-up or companion novel for Minas Voice. And Hannah Khan was been working on this one, and a lot of people are super excited. It brings in a really interesting perspective of Pakistani Americans. And in the first book, Amina is, into singing. She just loves using her voice, and she ends up having to use it for more standing up for her mosque in town as it is encountering some hard times. And so now she's coming back from vacation and she's just trying to tell people about her awesome time in Pakistan, and they're just not exactly excited to hear about it. And when she does her own presentation on her Pakistani hero, Malala Yousafzai, her classmates focus on the worst part of the story. So this one will concentrate on how Amina can just bring the beauty of Pakistan and Pakistani Americans to her classmates. Another big follow-up, Jerry Craft was the author of the first graphic novel to get the Newbery Award. And this is a companion to the New Kid as well. This is Class Act. It deals with another of the main characters in that book. Kind of also works with various privileges and how you can really, and how younger kids can adapt to that and just like face that as well, instead of just like putting it under the rug, because it's something that kids should be talking about too. And another one that I just love the cover that I just can't stop looking away with. This one actually is coming out in a week or so. This is Amari and the Night Brothers. It's a debut author, but they're already getting a ton of attention. This one has to do with the Supernatural Affairs Bureau, and our main character Amari is convinced that her brother is involved because he's supposed to be dead, but she doesn't believe it. And all the information about the Bureau she found underneath his closet, and she gets sucked in the whole world of supernaturals and ghosts, and no one believes her, but she's like, this is going to lead me to my brother, so I'm going to keep on going. And this is the first in a series. And lastly, I had to put a plug in for one of my favorite J series, and it's popular. We can hardly keep the books on the shelf. This is the next book in the Wings of Fire series. This is called The Dangerous Gift. It is the 14th book in the series, though it is the 4th book in the next set of 5. It's kind of hard to keep track of. If you have questions, email me. But this is a continuation of the storyline where there's a whole new continent of dragons with their own political upheavals and problems and racism, and they're finally being washed ashore to places where we knew from the first few sets of books, and how those dragons are going to clash against each other. And even though they're dragons, they're very personable. You're definitely going to see characters that remind you of yourself. It's not Game of Thrones kind of dragons. It's more along the lines of How to Train Your Dragon, but definitely some scheming and backstabbing to go on there. That series is also being made into graphic novels, but it will probably be a while until this one gets its own volume. That was supposed to come out in December. It has been pushed back to March. And that is all I have for our juvenile and teen. Of course, there's more where that came from, but I'm sure since you are library regulars, you know where to find us.
Thank you so much, Kelly. You're right, the cover for that Amari book looks stunning. That's beautiful.
Next time I'm trying to buy books for my grandchildren, I'm going to talk to Kelly.
Oh,
yeah.
Definitely. Like if you have younger people in your life, or if you know someone who really enjoys juvenile and teen stuff, hit me up.
Yeah, Kelly's got this down.